Hello everyone and welcome back. In this video, we're taking our perspective drawing skills to the next level. We've already covered the basics, and now we're going to explore how to draw more complex shapes and layer them in one-point perspective. You'll learn how to apply the same principles to different shapes and how to handle overlaps and depth to create more visually compelling scenes. Let's get started. I've started by placing several shapes around the vanishing point, filling any empty spaces with both geometric and organic forms like circles, ovals, rectangles, stars, and so on. Next, I refine the shapes by using a ruler to clean up the lines and then outlining them with finer strokes. Remember, our goal here is to explore drawing more complex and irregular shapes. It's okay if your angles aren't perfectly symmetrical or if your circles and squares aren't flawless. Use a ruler for straight lines and freehand for curved and organic lines. Okay, let's begin with this circle. First, I'll erase the portion of the horizon line that's overlapping the shape, as the horizon should recede behind our foreground elements. Therefore, anything that appears in front of the shape should be erased. We're doing the same steps that we did for the circle in our previous video. I'm drawing two lines parallel to the top and bottom of the circle's outer edges. I'll connect these lines to the vanishing point and determine the depth of the cylinder. I can draw a duplicate of the shape either closer or farther away near the vanishing point, but let's make it more interesting and extend it further back. So I draw a duplicate of the circle receding into space to create the cylinder in perspective. Now let's erase the unnecessary converging lines and the portion of the horizon line that overlaps the cylinder. Some parts of the original shape will be erased along with the guidelines, so we'll need to redraw them. Then we'll redraw the portion of the horizon line that was erased. Moving on, let's work with this triangle here. Notice how I've intentionally overlapped these two shapes. Now we'll decide which shape should be in the foreground and which in the background. This choice is optional. It doesn't matter which one is closer to the vanishing point. You can put the farthest shape on top if you prefer. I've decided to place this shape on top so the triangle will appear behind it. First, I'll erase the portion of the triangle that overlaps the foreground shape. Then I'll erase the horizon line where it crosses the triangle. Remember to do this for all shapes that appear to overlap the horizon line, as it represents the background. As a result, some of our outlines have disappeared, and we need to redraw them, but only for the foreground shape. I will also redraw the parts of the triangle that were erased while removing the horizon line. Now let's draw the converging lines. As we covered previously, any corner facing the vanishing point that isn't blocked by the shape itself should be connected directly to the vanishing point. For the back corner of the triangle that is hidden behind this shape on the top, the path to the vanishing point is blocked. Therefore, we don't need to draw that converging line. With that done, we'll now draw the parallel lines. I align my ruler to this line and draw a parallel line to give width to the form. Next, I'll erase the converging lines again, and I'll redraw any of the shape's main lines or the horizon line if they were erased. Now let's move to this shape, which I wanted on the foreground, so the organic shape will appear behind it. Remember, this decision is optional. And then I'll connect the three visible sides to the vanishing point. Notice that this corner of the shape's line passes through the shape itself to reach the vanishing point. Because this line is not visible, we don't draw it. Now I'll line up the ruler with each side of the shape and draw a parallel line to the desired depth. We'll repeat this for the remaining sides. To determine the depth, I move the ruler until it connects with this point, and this is where I draw my new line. Since the horizon line is not overlapping this shape, we only need to erase the converging lines. Moving on to the next shape, this one isn't overlapped or blocked, so we'll draw it using the same process as before. I can see the right corner from this viewpoint, so I connect it to the vanishing point. The back corner, on the other hand, clearly passes through the shape, so it doesn't need a converging line. Once again, to draw parallel lines, I line up the ruler with each side of the shape and duplicate it. Then I'll remove those unnecessary guidelines. Alright, that wraps up the warm-up, where we practice with some simpler and familiar forms. Now let's move on to more complex shapes like this heart shape I've drawn here. First of all, I'll connect the sharp corner on the bottom, which is straightforward. Then I'll move to the curved upper part. For the upper part of the heart, I'll draw a line from the vanishing point to the outer edge of the shape, just like what we did for the circle. As for the inner side, if we draw an imaginary line from this point to the vanishing point, it would pass behind the shape, so we don't need to draw that. I can see some of the top angles from this view, so I'll connect a line from the back curve to the vanishing point. Note that this converging line falls almost directly on the horizon. Now let's draw a duplicate of the heart shape here, overlapping it with this hexagon. Then I'll remove any extra lines. For this shape, we need to connect each corner that faces the vanishing point. If a corner faces away from the vanishing point, we can skip it. This corner is straight and parallel to this line, so I don't have a direct view of that angle. Therefore, I don't need to draw it. I can see these 4 corners from this viewpoint. To make things more interesting, I'll add more depth to the shape so it overlaps to the other 2 shapes. I'll draw the next line using the same technique. Now there are a few things here to clean up. I'll erase the parts of the previous shapes that are overlapped by the hexagon. And then I'll remove the unnecessary converging lines. Next, I'll redraw any of those erased outlines. Alright, we're almost done with the most of the shapes. Moving on to the star, which can be challenging, I'll show you which corners to connect to correctly draw it in perspective. First, I'll connect the 3 corners that are closest to the vanishing point. We shouldn't connect the 2 inner corners because the right side is parallel with this line and the left side is behind the star itself. So the only lines that need to converge at the vanishing point are from these 2 edges, and these 3 rear sides of the stars are hidden behind the shape. Now I need to decide how much depth to add. I want to avoid overlapping the square and instead prefer to overlap my star a little with the oval. First, let's ignore the oval completely for now and proceed as if it doesn't exist. The first side to draw is this part here, so I'll start with that. I'll draw a duplicate of it, maintaining the same angle. Next, I'll draw this side, lining up my ruler and going back to this point to draw the line. Then for this side, I'll again line up my ruler and go back to this point and draw the next line. This part is invisible from this viewpoint, so I'll draw this other side instead. Finally, I'll remove any extra lines and darken the main outlines. For the rest of the video, I'll quickly draw the remaining shapes, adding depth and perspective. I'll speed up the video a little bit here so you can follow along visually. Feel free to draw with me. Alright, that brings us to the end of this perspective drawing tutorial. We've covered a lot today, from drawing complex shapes to layering them effectively in one-point perspective. Remember the principles of converging lines, overlapping, and building depth to create a realistic sense of space. The key is consistent practice. So I encourage you to continue experimenting with different shapes and arrangements. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.